So last time I'm gonna throw this clip away and start over. All right, here we go. So last week we took the 65 wagon and we went to the local car show. That's an annual event. It's their 40th year running that car show, which is pretty fantastic. And we wanted to go and support it because it's the only way you keep events like that alive. Well, needless to say, the wagon's probably not quite ready to be on the road. I mean, yeah, it was a success. We made it there. We had a good time. We made it home. Mostly without issue. Kind of with some issues. So what I'm after right now is we're going to look at what some of the problems are, some of the things we've really got to fix on this car before we can actually get it on the road and go more than the less than 15 miles that we did last time. So one of the things I mentioned in the last video right at the very beginning was that we mangled the oil pan. And that happened before I even made it out of the driveway. And well, to be honest, I love the way the car sits. It's got a really nice stance to it. But the front end is just too low. And that's not because I don't like lowered vehicles. I actually think the stance is great and it looks right the way it's sitting. But because this is a stock front clip, it just does not have the right suspension setup in there to handle being this low, nor does it have the right oil pan to be this low. So before I even got all the way out of my driveway, which I don't even know how well you'll be able to see it up there, there's a concrete slab. It's gravel from my driveway all the way out to a gravel road, but we've got a concrete slab right there at the driveway. And there's enough of a lip there, about yay much, that I snagged the oil pan on it. And well, we'll look at that here in a minute. But so yeah, I got to show you the oil pan, which is probably going to be an absolute pain in the neck because I think the only way, I don't know that I can get it out of there without pulling the motor out to fix it. The upside is we didn't actually break it open, so we kept the oil in the car and we were able to go to the event. Past that, we started on the road to get there, and at low speeds, unnoticeable, but once we got out on the road and started driving, the car doesn't drive well at all. The front end wants to bob and weave real bad with every little bump, and even worse, it doesn't want to return to center, especially from the right. If you turn to the right, you have to muscle the car back over to center, that's not the way it's supposed to be. And I didn't think the alignment was all that bad when I first just eyeballed it, but I didn't measure anything because, you know, who has time for that? So what I did here is I went and pulled out a couple of tape measures to get some crude measurements just to see how far off it is. And I don't know how well we can see this on video, but here at the back side of, well, before I do that, let me show you what I did on the other side so you have an idea. Over on the other side, I just took a 2x4, pressed it up against the tire, eyeballed that one as close to straight as I could. Let me see if I can shorten the little camera stick. Come on. There we go. Hey, there's a cord in the view. There we go. Fix that. Tilt this a little bit. So yeah, so I eyeballed it, just, you know, eyeball straight with the car, which should be straight down the road, right? And then I kicked a 2x4 up against the side of the tire, which is mostly in line with the wheel. If you look at the distance, that's, you know, from the rim to here on my finger versus if I bring it over this way, it's about the same. It's about right there at my middle knuckle, right? All right, and then I came around to the other side, threw some tape measures underneath that are going over and are butted up against that 2x4. This is just going to give a real rough idea of where the alignment how far off it is. So back here at the back side of the tire, it looks like if I look straight down on it, we're about 66.5 inches is where the light's hitting it right there. And then at the front side of the tire, which this has got smaller numbers on this tape measure, we're probably somewhere around 67 1/8, 67 1/4, which means that there's, well, somewhere around 3/4 of an inch of toe out on this tire. And if I come around to the front and you look at this one, I don't know how well you can tell looking at it in the video, but it's pointed out a good bit, which means that our alignment is nowhere near correct. Get out of the way, wire. So our alignment's nowhere near correct. When you're doing it with tape measures and you're just trying to get close before actually getting it on an alignment rack, the goal is to be an 1/8 inch or less from difference between the front and the rear of the tire. And different cars are different, and different driving methods use different alignments, whether you get into race stuff or driver stuff. Whatever the case, it's never supposed to be upwards of 3/4 of an inch difference, which is going to make the car just handle absolutely terrible on top of the fact that these have a notoriously bad front suspension as far as bump steer is concerned. So we have that problem. That's one thing. And then where we'll adjust that, oh, look, I'm putting my fingers in there, and I'm all over the camera this time. So we'll adjust that as we change out the springs. And like I'd mentioned in the video on the way to the car show, I have the stock front clip off of this car. Granted, taking parts from that won't fix the alignment, but they're better parts. And that's not really saying a whole lot until we look at, if we look at these suspension parts, and they're a little grimy, but the joints are all there. This front end was pretty good and tight, didn't cause any problems. And the ride height, which I'll pop up a photo somewhere, wherever there's room, because I don't know where that's going to be yet, on the screen of what the ride height on the red car was before we started the chassis change on that. And that's about where we're going to end up with this, because that red car, it had a 327 4-speed combo in it, and the same front end, and the front half of the car should weigh almost identical to the front half of the wagon. The extra weight on the wagons is in the back end because the body goes back further. And I don't have any issue with the way the back end stance is on this car, on the wagon. So we're going to probably leave that alone. Other than that leads me to one of the other things I noticed driving the car the last time out is that, man, I'm just not happy with the cameras. I'm filming on a weekday and that's throwing me off. But anyway, something I noticed about the back end of the car while we were driving is when I'd hit a bump, there was a clunk in the back end, and it wasn't the stuff. Originally I thought it might have been stuff in the back, but then after listening to it a few more times and noticing that it was specifically with bumps where the suspension compressed, I think it's a problem in the suspension. So I'll have to look at that and see if we can't figure out what that is, if it's a bad bushing, a bad shock, something along those lines, which it probably is. Let's see. Wonder if I hop on it a little bit. Adjust the camera. Man, I'm going to make a mess of things on this video. We'll try and fix some of that. Let me put this down right here. Yeah, that should be about right. See if I can make it do that, make the clunky noise. Yeah. So I'll have to get somebody else to hop on it while I'm under it to actually find out what that is. Or maybe we'll find out together. Let's see if I take the camera and I collapse this all the way down. Is this short enough? Oh, bear with me. I'll probably cut this. There we go. All right. No, I won't cut it. That wasn't too bad, right? Anyway. There's gas tank. Oh, yeah, by the way, we still got to replace the gas tank because I haven't fixed that problem yet. No, it's not going to be short enough. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. All right, there we go. There's a spot where I can put it. We'll see if we can see together what happens there. Hopefully I don't crunch the camera. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Who knows? Maybe that was a complete waste. Maybe we won't see anything. Or maybe while I'm editing the video, I'll be like, holy snap, there it is. That's what it's bottoming out on. But yeah, so we got to address whatever that clunk is. And so that was a bit troublesome, but it didn't seem to be affecting the way the car drove. It's just wimpy suspension. And clearly, see how soft it is, the shocks are, and how quickly it rebounds, the rear shocks are shot. Whatever. Not too worried about the shocks. The conch, yes. The shocks, no. But, yeah, so let me get the front wheel popped off, and we'll take a look under the front end. I'll get it up on jack stands, and I'll show you what that oil pan looks like. And then we'll go from there. And there's one other I should have known better that we'll touch on after I show you the oil pan and how bad the front suspension is on this. So yeah, give me a couple minutes. I'll put this down, get the car up, and we'll get going. Let's see. Right about there. Yeah, let's see. What's that look like? Perfect. Damn air compressor. Alright, we're done with the air compressor for now anyway, so we don't need to keep that on. So, here's what we're looking at here. Let's see. How good of a view is that? It's not great. All right, so what I think, may have been done is I think that these springs might be cut, and I'll see if we can get a better view here. Kind of a better view. There we go. So I think, I'm trying to see if I can, I mean, the fact that I can wiggle the spring around is much different than my other front end, which tells me that either the spring's been cut or it's just not the right spring. So that's got to change, right? And then looking at all of this, I have to hold this so I can move it around a little bit. Collapse it down again. Whoa. Sorry about that, guys. All right. Get rid of this for now. And tripod's off for the moment. Okay, so looking around at all the condition of the ball joints, tie rod end, the steering doesn't look too bad there. That actually doesn't look horrendous. No, that's definitely not right. Huh. So this is probably a big part of our issue here. The idler for the steering, which I wish I had more light. So the end of the rod coming from the other side is right here. And if I'm not mistaken, it should be up here, and it looks like it's off the joint completely. And there's an easy way for me to check this. I'll just go over and look at this front end, which I know was in good condition. Oh, no, it's the same over here. Yeah, the completely different setup though, the way this rod end is. So I'll probably end up taking the idler off of this front end, along with a lot of the other components that are on there, and switching them over, just because everything on here is crusty. I don't even know, with the condition of this, which again, maybe in editing I can bring up the light a little bit. I don't know that I can get that to where it'll ever be adjustable again. It's pretty rough, pretty corroded. And then let's look at the front. It does have a sway bar, which is an up. We'll have to recondition that. The bushings on the sway bar actually don't look too bad. They don't look too bad at the center. Ooh, that one's pretty bad though. The strut, or whatever you want to call this torsion strut. Yeah, there's an entire chunk of that missing right there. So we'll have to do something about that. That means that that's definitely contributing to our issue. Yeah, basically this whole front end's pretty grody. This is really what it boils down to. There's a lot of cleanup to be desired under here. It looks like someone replaced a bolt right here. I didn't do that, but that bolt is much newer and much cleaner than everything else in here. And it's not because they changed the bumper, or maybe they did, but the bolts at the other end are pretty corrody still. But yeah, so we'll have to address that. Conveniently, the brake lines actually look pretty good, which is nice. They look fairly new. This joint up here doesn't look so hot. but we're going to be addressing all of that because we're going to be going to disc brakes. Again, I think I've said this in the past. I've got the disc brakes that came off the red car, and bear with me, I'm spinning the base, the tripod base on so I can set this down. I've got the disc brakes that came off the red car that we'll put on here. We're probably going to have to fight with getting these drums loose because that might require a little heat and a little bit of persuasion. Anyway, we don't have to look inside there. The brakes, they work. And it stops fairly straight, so that's not terrible. But we're going to be going to the disc, so that really doesn't matter. More bushings that look bad. Up in here, these bushings are shot. So one thing I can say for certain is if you have one of these and you're looking at these kind of problems, right? Complete front end rebuild where you got to do something about springs that are bad, shocks that are probably bad, the idler arm probably bad joints, bad bushings on the strut. If you've got one of these and it's got all of this stuff going on that's an issue, make sure you price out the cost of changing all of these parts, whatever it's going to cost you, whatever you got to replace to do them, because you might find that the cost of those parts, it's not that much more to get a mini subframe kit like the CPP one, even the bare basic version of it, which is going to come with all new bushings and be a better suspension setup than this. The only reason I'm going to keep any of this for now is because I have parts already in hand that don't cost me anything because they're takeoffs from my other car and they're in driver shape. They'll last a while until I can redo this front end the way I want to. But seriously, if you're having to replace this stuff and you don't already have the parts, really consider going to a better suspension setup over putting money into one of these stock suspensions, unless you have, that all factory showroom floor original condition car that you were trying to restore to original condition. That would be the only exception to keep this junk. So yeah, that's that. Now, you're going to have to bear with me. We're going to go a little bit sideways because we've got to lay down to peek under the car. And let me show you what I did to the oil pan. Yeah, it's not pretty. All right, here we go, going down. Yeah. Oh, and don't mind that there's no inspection cover. That's something I still need to get, is an inspection cover, because it didn't have one. But as you can see, the oil pan, it's rough. I mean, this is the first time I've actually gotten under here and really looked at it, and holy crap. The fact that this is not spewing oil is amazing. It is mangled. I mean, it is sheet metal, so it probably could be heated up and straightened out. But yeah, that's, holy shit. Pardon my French, but that's really bad. That's just not ideal. And as you can see, I've got a little bit of a leak here as well, but it's not from the oil pan mangling, and it's actually not coming off the oil pan at all. It appears to all be coming from the transmission. So it's probably a transmission leak, not an oil leak. But yeah, this was how we started our morning to go to the car show. I didn't even make it out of the driveway before this happened, and that set the tone for the day, because it was a downhill slide. I keep tapping that on the ground. It was a downhill slide most of the day, out from under the car. Ugh. So yeah, it was a downhill slide most of the day. It was just one thing after another. Nothing that was completely crippling, because we drove the car home. And if you watched that video and made it to the end, you saw that we at least made it to where we were having lunch, dinner, whatever it was. And which was about halfway back home. So it wasn't like we went out of our way and added extra miles. I'm telling you, we did. It was probably less than 15 miles round trip is all we did. Because, well, things were deteriorating and I knew it wasn't good to go that much further. So the oil pan, got to fix that. And I've also got to fix the ride height on the front end so it doesn't happen again. I could go to a stock oil pan, which a stock oil pan on these, I actually have one. They're different than just about every other Chevy application out there because they don't use a rear sump. Oh, I don't know if I can get this with one hand. I got it. Okay, down to the floor. Don't drop. Oh, that was ridiculous. All right. So I got to adjust the camera again so it's the right angle. Man, I should have made my wife come out and should have made Paige come out and do the filming. All right, there we go. So the stock oil pan for the Chevy 2s, because of the way the front suspension was, is this is the front side of the pan and the sump is forward and it doesn't have a deep rear sump. Whereas a traditional Chevy, small block Chevy pan has the sump back here in the back. The pan that is on this car has a rear sump, but as you probably noticed, it's got a notch in it where the steering linkage is at so that it allows the steering to pass by. It's a real common, you could say upgrade, but it's more of a swap part than it is an upgrade. All oil pans have their problems. One of the things that's real common with the stock pans, if you do a high performance application, is with the sump in the front, you accelerate real hard and the oil shifts and rides high in the rear and you can lose oil coverage on your pickup. Again, that's a high performance application. With this car, it'd probably be fine because it's not going to be a high performance car, at least not anytime soon. It's going to be a cruiser. So we could probably go to this if I can't fix the pan that's on there. The rear sump pan is better for keeping the dipstick or the pickup submerged in the oil, just because most of the time you're traveling forward, you're accelerating forward, and your oil is being pushed towards the back of the pan, and your motor typically sits with a couple of degrees of rear down on the motor, so the oil naturally wants to be at the rear of the pan with that. But yeah, we'll see. These pans aren't, this is an original, but they do remanufacture these. They're not cheap, but they're not really that much more expensive than the aftermarket swap pan. Unless you want to go to a later motor that's got a one-piece rear main seal, then I don't know that they make an original style pan that will accept a one-piece rear main seal because they were designed for the two-piece rear main seal, which might prevent us from putting that pan onto this motor because I don't know if this is a one-piece rear main or not. Haven't made it that far into this motor to even know what the age of it is, other than the heads. Oh, now my camera's complaining about battery. Hold on, guys. Let me check that, and I'll get right back with you. All right. I don't know why the camera is complaining about battery. Battery's perfectly fine, and it runs on an external that says it's great, but whatever. It doesn't matter. Moving on. The last piece that was a really I should have known better, but I went for it anyway, was the fact that this car, whoever did the motor swap on it, kept the original serpentine system that's in here. Again, bear with me. Got to get rid of the stand-up legs. They're going to be in my way. Yeah, my stand-up legs for my holder. They work great, and they also get in the way. But yeah, so whoever did the motor swap on this kept the serpentine system from, oh, good Lord. Kept the serpentine system from whatever this motor came out of, which has a power steering pump. Now, this car does not have power steering. So the power steering lines are just loosely hanging right here, which is whatever. That doesn't bother me. They're not where they're going to get caught anywhere. But what you can't do, because it'll kill them, is you can't run power steering pumps dry. Well, this one's dry. surprise, surprise, if it wasn't dry, it would pump fluid right out those lines, and then it would be almost instantly dry. So on our way home, we started to smell a burning smell. And what was that? That was the bearing and the power steering pump cooking itself, which is probably seized up now that it's cold, now that everything cooled off. So this serpentine system is a problem. It's a big problem. One, because it looks like garbage, and two, because I can't run a power steering pump. Can't do it. At least not unless I put power steering on the car, which is not going to happen anytime soon, so the power steering pump's got to go. Furthermore, this system also has a AC compressor, and we have no AC on the car. And it's probably going to be a little while before we get AC on the car, because we're probably not going to need it until next summer. So it's not at the top of the priority list to add vintage air. There's a few other things like, making it drive halfway decent that needs to get done first. So this needs to go. And ultimately, this serpentine setup just looks like garbage. Looks like garbage. So we need to get rid of that. And while we're in the process of doing that, the alternator wiring needs to be fixed, which, granted, that didn't actually give me any issues other than the fact that when it's parked, I got to disconnect the battery so that the alternator doesn't stay hot, which, whatever, I can live with that for now. But when we pull the serpentine system and get rid of these big ugly cast brackets and the power steering pump, the AC compressor and the idler and all this stuff, then we'll also look at fixing the wiring mess that's under here so that we have proper wiring and everything works the way it's supposed to. So to do that, what I'll end up doing is I will get a couple more pulleys just like these right here that are on my 327. And these are just standard V-belt pulleys. They are both 2-groove. And yeah, so I'll run a 2-groove setup and run that same basic setup on this car. And when we do that, the alternator is actually going to go from here up top, because I think alternators are ugly. Even really nice shiny ones are ugly. And we're going to put the alternator down low, down there, next to the side of the block, right above the cross member, so that the alternator is hidden nice and down low, which will also help us take this wiring and move all of that down low and clean up the engine bay so that it just looks nicer. And there's a couple of different bracket styles out there you can do that with. The one that I have currently, let's see if I can find it over here in my parts bin. It was here somewhere. Looking. No, there's carburetors, alternator. Oh, it's right here. So yeah, it looks very similar to aftermarket power steering mounts that go down low. Bolt into a couple of the bolt holes that are in the front of the block, and just hangs your alternator right there off the front of the motor. Flip that over so I don't lose the hardware. Too late. It's already coming apart. Anyway, so yeah, and I might even just use that one and get a new one for the 327 when it's time to put that back together. And while I'm over here, something else I'm going to do, just because I can't stand them, is this Holley right here, which is just a 600 CFM 4-barrel vacuum secondary. That's fighting coming off the shelf. We're going to take this guy and replace that Edelbrock that's on the wagon, because I just don't like Edelbrocks. Maybe it's because I don't know how to tune them. That's probably a big part of it. I really don't know how to tune an Edelbrock. I know the basics about setting up the idle fuel mixture and setting idle RPM, but as far as jetting and air bleeds, I don't even know if they have. I don't think it has air bleeds. It's got something else in there. Whatever the case, I'm just not an Edelbrock. I don't know them well enough. Not that they can't be great. It's just I prefer the Holleys. They're what I know. So we'll take that 600. We'll put that on here. That should be an ideal carburetor for this application, the right CFM. It's got the right hookups as far as running the vacuum advance, and it's got the right linkage setup to be able to run the kickdown for the transmission. So that should be, should be a pretty good swap there. But yeah, so that's where we're at. We had a great time when we took the car out, but it's probably going to be a little while before we take it out again because, well, the best way to find out what you need to fix on an old car to make it a driver is to drive it and find out what it's not doing that it should. And, well, this one's got a few things it's not doing that it should, and a few things that it is doing that it shouldn't, like the clunky or the drag the oil pan all over the place and smack it on a 2-inch lip of concrete. So yeah, that's it. Unfortunately, I'm not doing any wrenching on the car this time because, like I said, I'm filming in the middle of the week. My weekend was a little bit busy with other stuff and didn't get to get a shop day in. Hopefully we'll get another shop day in maybe this coming weekend and start tearing into some of these things that need to get fixed. If not, we'll figure something out. We'll be back on it very soon. There's definitely plenty to do. We've got our winter projects cut out for us. This one over here is waiting for some more attention. Man, it's a dusty. Living off of dirt roads makes everything dusty. They're hard to keep clean. And this one over here, which we haven't done anything with on the channel yet, is also waiting for some attention. We'll probably dig into that a little bit over the winter. I think I've got some neat plans for that car to make it a good driver and to keep it budget friendly. And then, maybe someday we'll work on that one a little bit and see if we can't put that one back on the road. But don't get too excited. That's probably a ways off. We got the Chevy 2s to deal with first. So that's about a wrap. I just heard my wife holler at me from the house that dinner's ready. So I'm going to go ahead and say thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting the channel. And we'll see you guys on the next one.